BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
You're listening to Front Row with Samira Ahmed.
Now, what would be the perfect opera to stage when the audience is stuck at home watching their individual screens? Well, how about one by Benjamin Britten, written especially for television? Owen Wingrave first appeared on BBC Two in May 1971. Based on a Henry James ghost story, it's an atmospheric anti-war statement from Britain, which tells the story of Owen, who's grown up haunted by portraits of his militaristic family, and as a young pacifist, is disinherited. Grange Park Opera have recorded a new version of Owen Wingrave to watch via YouTube. It was filmed over 5 days with social distancing measures in place in suitably haunted houses. It stars Ross Ram Gobin as the eponymous Owen, alongside Susan Bullock, Richard Berkeley Steele, Kitty Waitley and Janice Kelly.
There was a boy, a Wingrave born, a Wingrave born to kill his foe. Far away on sea and land, the Wingraves were a fighting band.
Trumpet blow, Paramore shall welcome war.
The opening of Act 2, where we hear the story of the Wingraves, and the director Stephen Medcalf joins me now. It's always interesting with the director in the room listening back to the production. This is the culmination of Grange Park Opera's interim season during COVID, which must have been so disruptive. Whose idea was it to do this?
Well, the brainchild of Wasfi Khani, the artistic director and founder of Grange Park Opera, who, was the first to react really when everything fell about our ears and everything collapsed and lockdown happened, and we were all I think we went into shock. I certainly did, as our livelihoods were pulled out from under our feet. And Wasfi, I think, was one of the first, not the first, to react. And we lost a season, but she created a found season, and she got all sorts of eminent artists, including Bryn Terfel and Simon Keenlyside, Roddy Williams, and then started to put work on the stage. I think one of the first ones. Concerts with eminent orchestral players and an opera, La Voix Humaine. And then I think we were kind of perhaps the most ambitious project, the culmination of this sequence of events that she put on.
Well, it was written for television. What's your sense of how the opera was supposed to work? Because it's only been staged twice, hasn't it? 71 and then once since.
Well, very much to make a immediate contact with the audience. The opera, I think, was meant to work for audiences to be really drawn in. And in fact, strangely enough, the original production, although it was a television opera, it was filmed on huge, quite theatrical sets.
Oh, really?
But I feel like that, essentially they wanted to tell the story in a very intimate way. The BBC commissioned the opera, and Britain chose this opera because it was so close to his heart as an expression of his pacifism.
Well, tell me about, how you've changed it, because some of his work is, known to be kind of small-scale chamber opera, might seem a little old-fashioned. You've set this in 2001 after 9/11, is that right?
Yes, I mean, this was something that, I'm a great believer in making a virtue out of necessity. And I think often your most felicitous artistic choices end up being ones that are made for you, in a sense. We didn't really have much choice because everything was provided by the singers for COVID reasons. The singers provided their own costumes. We were in houses. We moved into the houses, which the owners very kindly allowed us to use, sponsors and friends of the opera. And we moved into the houses and we literally moved a few pieces of furniture around, but we had to use them as we found them. So it was very natural that we would set it in a contemporary setting. But of course, I think it works extremely well. It really brings attention to the violence. And we're talking really about the Afghan war, and it brings it very home to roost and very present to us.
What will the audience see if they go on to watch it?
Well, I hope they will see something, a very intimate character study, really.
I mean, is it like a Zoom call in that sense? Are there different people in different...
Yeah, we very much... I mean, there are a whole number of aspects really to talk about the staging. First of all... you can't have people very close together. obviously, and you can't have physical contact. Well, as it happens, the Wingrave family are not a very tactile bunch. And so that sort of played into our hands. And therefore, the only bit of really strong, I may add, highly sanitised contact we had, suddenly, between Owen and Kate, suddenly comes really into focus when you have all that kind of distance. I also am a great believer in the use of the close-up anyway with opera on television. It has so much more power and energy, and close-ups of course lend themselves also because you don't have other people in shot to the COVID necessities. But there were times, of course, on opera. The thing about opera, of course, that's so different from prose or drama is that you have many occasions when the singers sing together. And of course, it's the ensembles in a way the biggest challenge.
How did you manage that then?
Well, in a number of ways. One was to make groupings, shall we say, perspective groupings, so that by choosing clever camera angles, that these groupings, actually the singers appear to be closer together than they are.
Yeah.
And then we use a lot of close-ups, and we'd pass from one face to the other. And you, of course, as a director, you make the choice of who you want to listen to. And finally, I kind of embraced the iconic COVID image by, as you just mentioned a little bit earlier, by putting the singers in those boxes, which are such a kind of, to me, kind of powerful and poignant reminder of this time that we live in. And you kind of see that their kind of individualism, they're kind of trapped in these boxes. But at the same time, you're able to see 4 singers expressing different feelings, different ideas and different text at the same time, which of course is unique to opera.
Yeah, well, of course, they could be portraits, couldn't they, of ancestors?
And they are indeed connected with those portraits, yeah.
You filmed it over 5 days in September.
Yes.
So how, I mean, apart from what you've already told me, how did it work for them all in these different locations?
Well, I mean, it was a whirlwind. We'd arrive, we'd make the sound recording to the backing track that already existed. We would make we'd already planned all the shots very carefully, and then the singers would prepare themselves. Obviously, they did their own makeup. They brought in their own costumes in consultation with me. And we literally moved through, almost in narrative order, as far as we could, the sequence of scenes at tremendous speed with just myself, the videographer, very talented young man called Finton O'Connor, and Tom Marshall, the sound designer, and literally the 3 of us and the singers. And the great thing is I had a brilliant cast, so they were really able to, they were essentially taking care of their performances when I was concentrating on the very complex geography that we were required to have. So, but it was quite extraordinary in terms of the speed. I think to make a film of nearly 2 hours, 1 hour 50 of music, means we were recording about 25 minutes a day, which I think is unheard of.
Wow.
But I do hope that it gave it a kind of spontaneity and a kind of freshness, which is, as I say, I hope we make a virtue of, and I hope people will enjoy that sense that literally, I mean, a lot of things were taken in one shot. And so it was kind of, they had to become one-shot wonders. And then wherever we could use following shots, which, that would get it done more quickly. So again, we made a virtue of that by this kind of slightly rough and ready movement of the camera behind the singers. And so the whole thing had almost a kind of improvised homespun feel.
One thing I do want to ask is there's been so much soul-searching about what's going to happen to live performance after the pandemic. And opera is generally regarded as very expensive. Are you optimistic about its future?
Yeah, I am optimistic. Opera has survived. It's 500 years and counting. It's survived a lot of wars and plagues. Small independent companies will struggle, but there's a tremendous ingenuity, and we're kind of used to not being very well funded in this country anyway. There is a fantastic. I think there's a great passion for opera. In the last 10 or 15 years, the number of new companies formed, especially in the summer festival seasons, is extraordinary. So there's a great thirst for it. And opera, unlike almost any other art form, really doesn't translate in the same way to screen, as much as it's great to have the opportunity to put on Owen Wingrave, designed for television, the visceral nature of opera, the scale of the voices, the power of the orchestra. None of those things can really be replicated.
Stephen Medcalf. We can't wait to see it all back on stage too. Thank you. Owen Wingrave will be available to stream for free from tomorrow on the Grange Park Opera website till the end of the year. Tomorrow, how the National Trust found itself caught up in a culture war. Join John at 7:15. Thanks for listening to Front Row. I'm Samira Ahmed and the producer was Dimphna Flynn. The studio manager was Duncan Hannant and our production coordinator was Lizzie Harris. If you enjoyed it, remember you can discover more radio music and podcasts on BBC Sounds, on BBC Sounds, on BBC Sounds, on BBC Sounds.